This is Mike Tatarsky, host of the Vietnam Weekly podcast and author of the Vietnam Weekly newsletter, coming to you from Ho Chi Minh City for the first time in many months. In fact, this is the first episode of the podcast in 2026. I didn't intend for there to be such a long gap between episodes. Life and work have gotten in the way, and I've had some trouble coming up with guest ideas as well, to be perfectly honest. To that end, if you have any suggestions for who should be on the show, please reach out. There's no shortage of potential topics, as you can tell if you're a newsletter reader, but finding people to speak on them, some in particular, can be a little more challenging. Today's guest, meanwhile, is Cat Thao Nguyen, the founder of Earth Water, a pesticide-free rice brand from Tay Ninh province. We talked about Cat Thao's unconventional journey from corporate boardrooms and executive coaching to a rice paddy in rural Vietnam, the spiritual connection she feels to the land of her ancestors, what living in a low-income community has shown her after spending years in the relative prosperity of Ho Chi Minh City, and more. As always, if you have any comments, feedback, or guest ideas, get in touch at matatarsky@gmail.com. Let's get to my conversation with Cat Thao. Cat Thao, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, how are things going? You're over in Tay Ninh?
Yeah, lots of drama actually in the countryside. There's always something going on. So I'm in my second rice harvest as a rice farmer. So exciting, but this season is quite dangerous, high risk, lots of different factors. So yeah, just really in the thick of it.
Yeah, and we'll get to that obviously. So I guess we could start with a bit of your background. I mean, it's a bit unconventional, I guess you could say, what you're doing now, given you had a background in kind of the corporate world for a while and business coaching and those sorts of things. So how did you? I mean, feel free to expand on that a little bit. And how did you go from that into literally planting your own rice and Tay Ninh?
Right. Wow. It's yeah, it's certainly unconventional. So I had a background in corporate law. I actually set up Ernst and Young's law firm in Vietnam. And I was involved in private equity. I was a chief strategy officer for a $5 billion fund looking at a couple of markets, and also held like chief executive roles in affiliate companies of that fund. And then I set up my own leadership development company, and also became an executive coach. So, when I set up my company, I was mainly actually servicing clients outside of Vietnam, Fortune 100 companies all across the world. The only continents that I didn't work in were Africa and South America. And yeah, coaching C-level executives of Fortune 50 companies. And really, I think I was growing my business really well. I had people in Germany and Vietnam, Melbourne, Canada. And then something very interesting happened, which is quite, I think, to the logical, rational mind, it would be very challenging to understand. Um, I got a really immense urge. I think urge is the only thing I could say, to go to the house that my mother was born in and grew up in, and all her siblings and my grandfather, lived there. To go to that house and then to start going to the ancestral lands, which had a virgin jungle, and also rice fields. And these pieces of land have been in my family for 200, close to 200 years. And I would be the sixth generation, right? But the thing is, almost everybody in my direct family has migrated to the US or to Australia. So there's no one here really, as a direct descendant to take care of the land. We lease it out and so forth, but no direct descendant. So I began visiting this house, and as soon as I walked into this house, um, the most important thing about this house is that it has the ancestral altar. And as soon as I walked into this house, I just started sobbing. I started sobbing, and the feeling was as though I had come home, although I had never lived in this house before. Um, and the house is located in a very low income, working class neighborhood along a it's built along the bank of the Vam Godam River. And so in Saigon, if you see some of these like houses along these like canals, or, they're like, people would call them a slum, right? They're pieces of corrugated iron, rusted, you're basically almost falling into the river. There's no toilets. You basically throw everything to the river. And yeah, and so this house was like that. And I I just actually moved in, so I lived there, and it was a very challenging experience. All the conveniences weren't there, but every day I was tending to the ancestral altar, and that's what I was doing. And there were like all sorts of poo, all sorts of poo, like rat poo, cat poo. Yeah, so, I would lie, like, on the ground sleeping, and there'd be, like, this massive gap between the floor and the wall, so I could see the river, I could see the rubbish, floating in and out, and the giant rats just, like, right across, like, the basically where my head is. And, there was, like, oh my god, I just remember I walked in, there was a couple of things that was like, oh god, horrendous. Walked in, there's like a trail of maggots, and I was like leading, and I was like, "What is going on?" Is leading to a dead rat, and having to clean that. And then there was like, this trail of blood one day. I came home from the market, this trail of blood, and I'm like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" It's leading to where I was sleeping, and it turned out a stray cat had brought in like a dead fish, and he had ravaged the fish, and there's like guts everywhere. And yeah, and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? What am I doing? And I'm having calls, right, in this situation with like CEOs and massive companies, and there are people doing like illegal gambling at the front, and like they're yelling out like profanities, they're swearing at each other, they're calling out bingo and lotto numbers. And I'm like muting, unmuting, and when I'm muting, I'm trying to have this conversation about like, strategy and like, the market, and then it's just like 26, 42, and then like swearing, and oh my god. So in any case, I I heard that, the government was going to clear this whole neighborhood and gentrify it, and so I was like, "Well, where is this ancestral altar gonna go?" So then I decided, to build an ancestral house in the jungle next to the rice fields. And that commenced a journey of 3 years actually to do that, because there was no road access in. I could go, by canal, by boat, and yeah, so I had to build a road in actual to get into the land and find a contractor who would be crazy enough to take it on. And yeah, fast forward, I'm living here, and the rice fields, like, I decided to, well, my personal interest was, like, after I lived there, I saw the amount of pesticides that was being sprayed, everywhere, on the rice. And everything that we eat in the supermarket and, even in the wet market, it's all full of pesticides. And, relatives are being hospitalized all the time with all sorts of illnesses. And so my first interest was, I want to my immediate rice field that's right next to where I live, I don't want pesticides to be sprayed. So I took back the rice field from the person that we leased it to for like 25 years, and I decided to be a rice farmer and farm my own rice, eat my own rice, um, have it pesticide free. And as I was like living here and then brought the ancestral altar back, um, what became really clear is that I was actually called to this life by my ancestors. And one ancestor in particular who left with my family on the journey out as refugees. We were left by foot across the killing fields of Cambodia, and he disappeared there. And he's the youngest in the family, and he actually said that as a youngest male in the family, it's my duty to look after the ancestral altar and the ancestral lands. But I passed away before I could fulfill that duty. So I have chosen you in order to do this. And so therefore, I compelled you to leave Australia, to come to Vietnam, and then leave the Ho Chi Minh City, and then go back to this town, and then go into the rice fields to do this for our family and heal our lineage. So, it was a remarkable call, that initially I honestly didn't wanna answer. Because I had a pretty decent life, like, I thought I had, coming from acute poverty in Australia, and then, being able to have material comfort, I thought that, yeah, but but, um but I just had to listen to that call and the urge, and so here I am.
Yeah, I do want to talk a bit more about that call in a minute. But I realized maybe place the timing. So you mentioned 3 years. So when did you actually first go over there or to Tainan? I mean,
So 2023
okay,
was my first Lunar New Year in that house,
okay.
yeah.
And then and we've mentioned Tainan a couple times. I'm sure many listeners will know where that is. But how far is that from Saigon?
It's about 2 hours.
Okay,
Well, where I'm actually located is about 2 hours.
okay,
But Tainan proper, like the city of Tainan, is about 2 and maybe 2.5 to 3 hours away.
yeah,
And where I'm actually at is I'm probably around 7 kilometers away from the Cambodian border.
okay,
So I'm right near like Mok Bai.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Got it. Just to kind of locate it for people.
Yeah, sure.
Um, I mean, you mentioned the creature comforts you had in here in Ho Chi Minh City. I mean, how I can see from your background that it looks like you've done a nice job with that house. There's like nice tiling and artwork. But how did you kind of personally adjust to that? And then how did your friends either here or maybe your family overseas kind of react when you were like, I'm going to go move to a shack basically in Tay Ninh
Yeah,
initially.
yeah, yeah. Um, the majority of the responses range from confusion to anger.
Oh,
And I think and the anger was that we we give up our lives to go overseas and go to the West. We have died for that journey. And then currently, right now, people do all sorts of things, study abroad or even like dodgy ways, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and get, um, to the West. And here I am having all of that and throwing it away. So there was um, anger, there was confusion. There were then stories from people in the local neighborhood going, I'm running away from crime. I must have been involved in organized crime or something. I must have lots of debt
uh-huh.
over in Australia. So I'm actually running away from debt, and making up all sorts of stories as to why I'm doing this absurd thing. I'm really grateful that my parents were the pretty much the very few people that were very supportive of me. It was about they understood that it's returning to a sacred relationship with the land. Our lineage of 6 generations. It's very rare in Vietnam to have a family that still has the land after all this time, because people have gone into debt and they're sick and they've had to sell it and there's all sorts of different things, right? And so, my generation, the sixth generation, I came to Australia as a refugee, right? So we I didn't my sacred connection to that same land has been disrupted. And my parents understood that, and they were very, very encouraging and very supportive, even though I didn't even know at times what I was doing. So, yeah, that was the reaction. And the first part of your question?
Oh, I think kind of how you talked about kind of your personal challenges with adjusting with, rats and dead fish and
Right.
whatnot. But how did you
Right,
kind of
right.
get through that?
Right, right. So, for context, I grew up in Western Sydney in a suburb,
Mhm.
right? I have never, ever like lived on a farm or in any rural areas. You know, I was the person that like carried like insect repellent everywhere. um, and like, yeah, I mean, and we weren't like people it was like a hand to mouth like poverty situation. So we didn't like go, hiking or bushwalking or any of that sort of stuff, right? Um and so I had this moment where I was in the old house, right? And you know, you could hear everything from the neighbors. Like if they fart, you hear. If they sneeze, you hear. And then vice versa, right?
Well, sure.
Like, and then all the sorts of smells and so forth. And it was so hot. I mean, Thailand is very hot. Yeah. Um, and my uncle's my wife's husband was back from the US, and he's like a really good handyman. And I was like, okay, so I'm trying to do work still, so I'm trying to like build a room at least so that I can stay in and put a damn air conditioner in.
Mm, mhm.
And so he's helping me build this room. And at one point, and we don't have the equipment and stuff. So we're hand nailing, like old school nailing stuff into the ground, into the floorboards and into the thing. And it's like hundreds of nails, right? And so I'm in this situation where I'm like, I'm sweating, like I'm so hot. I'm getting heat rashes everywhere, right? And I'm nailing and nailing. And then I have this out of body experience. And I'm like, wow, I'm like watching myself completely physically uncomfortable and just hand nailing this, and the nails are breaking and it's just really crap. And then I had this moment where I'm like, either I just either I embrace this and it's just a happening, or
Mhm.
I actually have some drama and narrative and thing about it which causes me more suffering.
Mm,
So, I then sort of, like, went back into my body and situation. I'm like, "Oh, it just is. It just is. I made a choice. This is what it is, the conditions, so be it."
mhm,
And then, yeah, and then I had this f other experience which allowed me to really, really be sort of without fear, I would say. Because in this jungle, right, and I'm living alone as a overseas Vietnamese female.
mhm.
And everyone's saying, well, as soon as you're Viet Kiều, overseas Vietnamese, they think you're rich, right? And so when I started driving in from the town into this jungle, and I used to come back and forth, I saw these huge lights, like, and they had all been like almost like it was fallen down, and they're huge. And I was like, wow, it can't be wind. What happened? And then the locals told me that people like vandalized it so they can steal the copper inside the big poles. And that's government owned property.
Yeah.
And so my friends are like, "Oh my god, if they're that desperate, you are in honestly big danger
Mm,
by living there by yourself. You're gonna get robbed, you're gonna get assaulted, you might get killed," right? And so what happened was as I started living on the land and I started foraging, right? Because there's all sorts of food and plant medicine, and I started to sort of develop this deep relationship with Mother Nature there. And I was still enough, right? Because I didn't have all the distractions of the city. And I foraged this one particular superfood, and this vine has more iron than beef, per 100 grams, and it has all sorts of vitamin A, C, antioxidants. And I foraged this vine, which cannot be grown. It can't be cultivated. It has to just be wild. People tried. And so I harvested it, and then I boiled it up, and then I ate it. And I had this extremely incredible spiritual moment. And when I ate it, I I just I felt the sunlight in that vine. I felt the water, the soil, the storms. I felt the whole universe, and I felt merging with all of that and Mother Nature and the absolute abundance of Mother Nature. And despite what we do to her, despite all the horrible assaults we put on Mother Nature, she still keeps on giving.
Mm.
And so the first time in my life, I felt unconditional love,
Mm.
and it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
My parents were traumatized people, so they couldn't, I guess, love me the way that a child will yearns to be loved unconditionally, you know? And
Right.
then culturally, they have it's almost like transactional sayings like, "Oh, do this, then I'll love you," "Mum will love you." And
Sure.
it's these sort of things that have been passed down. So I never felt unconditionally loved until that moment.
Mm.
And when that happened, what subsequently happened for me was that all sense of fear just dissipated. dissipated. And so as I'm on the land and I see poisonous snakes, I just don't have any fear. And the thought of people coming to do things or take stuff or whatever, I'm like, okay. And then the fear of death also dissolved. And so, how I can come to be in this land is because I feel unconditionally loved by Mother Nature. I feel a deep sense of belonging in myself. And I've had this really incredible sacred experience also with my ancestors. I really feel their presence here, and including the first mother, which is my great, great, great grandmother who migrated here from China.
Mm.
Uh, and so that is what has allowed me to, in many ways, like for people, it's unfathomable to go from the corporate life in a city life to fully being being here on the land, and doing hard labor. I'm here on my own, and
Yeah.
I actually do most of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to. We'll get to the rice aspect in a minute, but I did want you to, or if you want to expand, let you expand a little bit on the spiritual aspect, which you've mentioned a couple times, particularly this relative who vanished in Cambodia when you guys fled. So I'll say I don't consider myself a spiritual person. I have a much different cultural background than you, of course. But we had coffee a few weeks ago, and certainly some of what you shared was pretty striking. Some of your experiences, when you were building the house and things like that. So I just wanted to give you a minute to share some of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, just there's a range of mystical experiences that happened to me while I was living here. Like my uncle came and spoke through a person. Um, and yeah, he said he chose me and
Mm.
to heal the lineage, to have a continuation with the land, which is a sacred relationship. I think many people don't understand um, how your relationship to the land can heal you, because it's a part of you. My father was still of the tradition where when he was born, his placenta was buried in the land. And you do
Mm.
that because the placenta nourishes you. It's your life source. And your ancestors are also buried on the same land. So their flesh, their bones, become part of the land. And so when your life source, your placenta, as soon as you're born, your first few breaths, they cut the umbilical cord and they put the placenta in the land because your life source joins your ancestors. So you already then have this through the land, through the soil, through the waters around you. You have a direct relationship and connection to your ancestors. and the ancestors is the land. The ancestors become the land, and they hold you and they carry you and they take care of you, and so and I think many First Nations people talk about the sacred relationship to the land, and so I came to understand that, for myself. And you're held by the land, and because the land is you, the land is your ancestors are you. There's this circular, um and cyclical knowing, and because of that sacred relationship, and if you deeply, deeply feel it, you don't want to harm the land. You don't wanna take more than the land gives. You don't wanna be extractive and exploitative, and so I've come to also experience the rituals, of our ancient culture that I think in the city we don't really, we forget, because a lot of this is around agriculture. A lot of this is around, like, harvest cycles, I when I brought the ancestral altar back, the day after, um, the day after, this wild bird came into the house, and it
Mm.
was a wild bird that no one had ever seen in this area before, and it stood on my grandmother's sewing machine, and then it went to my grand for 10 minutes, and then it went to my grandfather's sofa set for 45 minutes, and I went to touch the bird, and it let me touch it. And it had this incredible, like, human eyes, and it was just really deeply reflective. And my mum's friend called and she said, "That's my uncle." It's a beautiful omen that he's affirming, what we're doing. Uh, yeah, and I've been able to find the grave of my great, great, great grandmother that has been lost for at least 150 years. And so, it's been beautiful to, um, to see the stories, to collect all the stories of all these people and situate them in times, French colonial times, the Japanese occupation, and then through the Civil War. It's like, how have they lived and what have they given me, in terms of their stories? And the way that they lived and the qualities they had, like of social justice, of courage, of resilience, of compassion, that I practice every day when I light the incense on the altar. So, my connection to the land and to my ancestors has become this, governing mechanism for me to live a life that is well.
Yeah, and then so I mean, speaking of the land, we've kind of hinted at growing rice a couple times already. So you have this, I don't know if brand is the right word, but Earth Water, S25, pesticide free rice. So how did you go from, as you said, you grew up in suburban Sydney, and then lived in Ho Chi Minh City, kind of a concrete jungle, not a lot of outdoors. So how do you go from that to learn? How do you learn how to plant rice or grow rice?
Yeah. So look, I feel like I'm still an intern. And there's been, first of all, I think having, like, being radical, like, and doing things differently. And I have it definitely for clearly a radical streak. And really having a sense of determination, because all the locals are like, you're going to be ravaged. You're not going to be able to grow anything pesticide free because everyone around you, everyone's spraying. So, your rice field's going to be like an asylum center, like a refugee center for all this insects and pests, right? They're all going to go to you. So you're never going to do it. So everyone's naysaying. And, but I'm still really persistent to do this. And I have an absolute angel. I call him the plant whisperer. So he lives down in Javan in the Mekong Delta, and he is an absolute genius. He is a farmer himself, and he left a position at Javan University because of his passion to become a pesticide free farmer. So he knows. He's like philosopher, economist, spiritual seeker meets chemist, like, and so he has helped me so much, and he's doing practices. and helping me do practices which nobody here is doing at all, and they're all like, our philosophy is this. If you build up the immune system, how do you build up the immune system of the plant so that if there are diseases, fungus, bacteria, viruses, insects, it can withstand it, right? So you don't have to spray. And so, he can look at the color of the rice, and he'll know what to do, you know? And then so I'm here as the intermediary, working with one person who is helping me, do some stuff, but I'm also the one who's like flooding the rice field and then like draining it and watching the water and watching for the color and watching for that. So I have to do that daily. And the stuff that they do, like, because farmers generally in the supply chain of agriculture, there's a massive imbalance, and the imbalance is that the brokers for the agricultural commodities, their contribution to the whole value chain is probably about 3%, less than 5%. But the actual cash amount that they take and derive is about 70%. So it's completely not commensurate. So the farmers here, everybody sells to the brokers because they don't have a way to go from direct, from farmer to consumer, which is what I'm really trying to do here. And so a lot of the times, they're impoverished, especially if they have a major life event, like, they're really sick and they have to have a major operation or something. Yeah, so I and their practices, because of their situation, they don't take risks. And because they don't take risks, they don't innovate. So at the beginning, even up until like last week, I'm having to go into the big water canal up to my neck in water and mud to close the pipe, and to open the pipe and to let the rice in. And I'm like, this is so messed up. Like, isn't there another way? And so I spoke to the plant whisperer, Nyang, and he said, yeah, there's another way. So this other guy who was a retired surgeon, okay, he then became a farmer. He went back to the countryside. And because I think he's like understands valves, like heart flow and valves and how to, like put in like stuff, he invented a very cheap way. And so I just implemented like 2 days ago. So, yeah, so I don't have to, like, jump into the water, and so always monitoring it and adjusting it. Yeah, so, I'm still an intern, and I'm guided by, the locals and the plant whisperer, because the locals, they also understand the as much as possible, the cycles of the moon, the weather patterns, the tides, um, also the actual land itself, because it's not all even. There used to be a bomb crater on my rice field, and my uncle is the one that hand leveled that. And there are parts that are higher, there are parts that are lower. And so my relative who's been farming my rice field for 25 years, he knows every inch of it. I don't, so he's guiding me in terms of that intimate knowledge of the land.
Okay, gotcha. And I mean, you have harvested some already, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's oh my god, it was actually really emotional, Mike, because everyone said that, I'm not gonna get anything. If I'm gonna get
Right.
I'm gonna get nothing, or I'm gonna get only a little bit. And
Mm.
so I have like pretty much like 1 hectare, and I trialed just 2,000 square meters. And the day of the harvest, I could not we were absolutely overjoyed because we got a higher than expected amount, so we got, um, we got 25 bags, times 50 kilos each bag, so it's like 1,250 kilos, I think. But then which is already amazing, then I'm hand drying it, okay? So this is also a challenge because I'm not going via brokers.
Yeah.
I have to I have to find ways to dry the rice, right? And so I'm doing it fully old school, like putting it out and then drying it in the sun.
Hmm.
If it rains, that bad, 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 bad,
Yeah.
But yeah, during the last season is super hot, super dry, and sun drying is always better than putting it through a drying mill, you know. And in the drying process, it hardens up the grain, and it keeps in the nutrition.
Mm-mm.
So so it was amazing and so happy. But then I went to the local rice mill, and again, it's not a huge commercial rice mill. And when you put rice through a commercial rice mill, you strip it of nutrition. First of all, if it's white rice, you're stripping it of nutrition from the husk on the outside already, right? And then they go through a process where they polish so that it looks nice, you know? When you polish, all of that beautiful starch and nutrition is gone. And so when I'm doing it in the local little tiny rice mill that's been in this family for so long, we don't do that. There's no polishing, right? So you get the actual nutrition. But the thing is, like, because their operation isn't massive, they'll get broken bits, a lot of broken rice, and I just put it all in there as well because. But the commercial ones, they will just take that broken rice out because it's got to be all uniform and looking good. And that lady, the rice mill owner, so she's dehusking it for me, and she said, "Oh my god, out of everyone that I'm dehusking for around here, especially people who are growing S25, ST25 for their own consumption, none of their rice is as beautiful looking as yours."
Nice.
And
Okay.
I was like, "Oh my god." And you know what that means? That means that with their rice, when they as soon as they put it through, it breaks.
Mm.
It breaks. But because my rice has nutrition, there's much less breakage. So the actual weight is also more. So for 99 kilograms of unhusked rice, I got like 57 kilos of actual
Mhm.
rice. And
Mm.
so that exceeds the standards. It's normally 50 kilos.
Right, right, right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was amazing. It was incredible. So now I'm doing the harvest the second time, and it's the full rice field.
Okay.
It's full rice field now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, really
um,
excited. Yeah.
so, last couple questions. I mean, well, so obviously this is still like relatively new for you or early days, I suppose. But what do you hope to do? I mean, if you just want to keep doing what you're doing now, that's totally fine, obviously. But do you hope to like expand or anything like that? I'm just curious where you kind of see this going.
Yeah, I mean, everyone sort of asked me, "Oh, you're gonna scale and you're
Sure,
gonna,
sure.
like, do get other farms," and I'm like, I used to be in investments,
Yeah.
right? Investment world, and the whole investment world is all about scale.
Yes.
And the question is like, why scale?
Mm.
Why do you wanna scale? I don't. I don't actually wanna scale. I don't necessarily wanna scale. First of all, my relationship to money has changed, right? I used to have a deep scarcity mindset. I used to have deep fear of returning back to poverty,
Hmm.
and that poverty haunted me and traumatized me. But like I've healed from that. And, once I felt like Mother Earth's love, I just don't feel like I feel like I have enough. Right. And so I just want to continue the tradition on this sacred land,
Mm.
that carries the memory of, and the tears of my mother and the blood of my grandmother and all the memories of all the mothers of 6 generations, of 5 generations before me. And I want to be able to grow it in conditions of joy, because all of the 5 generations of women, especially before me, there was persecution, oppression. My great my grandfather's brother was executed by the French. There was so much pain and trauma,
Mm.
and they could never farm this rice with joy.
Mm.
They could never do that, and what I'm doing is that. And so when people eat my rice, I say, "This is not just food, it's not just rice. This is a gift. This is a gift of healing from my ancestors to you,"
Mm.
you know? And so if I scale, how can I keep the quality? Like,
Yeah, sure.
if I get other people to do it, can I be sure that they're not spraying pesticides?
Mm.
Like once I started selling it, the locals came to me and said, "Oh, you know, can we do contract rice farming for you because, we want more money." But then I'm like, "Can I guarantee that they're not going to panic and then start spraying?" Right? I can't. I can't do that. People have wanted to talk about, like, people are talking about farm stays. Can we actually come and see the rice where you're growing it? Can we do a farm stay? I have built a guest house,
Okay.
mainly for friends and family. But I'm also a very passionate like cook, and I'm
Nice.
cooking with my rice. I'm growing vegetables, and maybe there's going to be like a farm to table experience out here,
Mm,
an experience through food of connecting back to Mother Nature, and connecting back to yourself. Um, so maybe that's on the cards. I don't know. At the
sure.
moment, I'm just day by day at Earth River Farms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I guess last question. I'm curious whether or how this move has kind of like shifted your perspective on Vietnam at all. Living in Ho Chi Minh City, obviously it is Vietnam, but chunks of it are quite wealthy, quite international. Whereas the reality is, millions of people here still live in communities like the one you moved into. But yeah, I mean, has that kind of like changed how you view the country at all?
The majority of Vietnam's population don't live in the urban centers or the cities, right? So having lived here now in this village, a rural village, I look back on my life in Ho Chi Minh City and it is such a bubble. It's a complete bubble, living in the apartment. Here, first of all, I now understand why my parents are the way they are. Like, and I also understand Vietnam immensely more, um, how they make decisions, even like dynamics within companies, within teams, even with big international companies, there's still like a cultural way of being, and it's extremely pronounced in the village, right? We have this village mindset, and there's this interdependence on other people, right? And even though there's rural urban migration, you carry that sense of apprehensiveness to confront people or to be direct, right? Like we understand that Vietnamese people are not very direct in terms of communication, but then here I totally get it. Like the waterways, for example, there are some rice fields where if you make me upset, I can just block you. And because I'm closer to the water source of the canal, right? And so then they're stuffed, essentially. So there's this sort of real economic interdependence that's going on. And so like that governs the way that you are connected to the land through agriculture. That dictates your behavior to your neighbors and to the surrounding people, right? So yeah, I understand Vietnam significantly more. The other thing that I have, it's sort of unexpected, is that I I'm exposed to a lot more cultural, spiritual Vietnamese cosmology practices that are ancient. And and I have such now greater reverence for my own culture, because within all of those practices, even though some people, they do it and it's become like just routine, you know? Whereas for me, I have these independent, curious Western eyes in a way. And so I'm looking at all these symbols, and I'm looking into it and I'm asking why? And many people don't know, but I ask ChatGPT and I do the research, and once I understand, it's absolutely stunning. there is um such meaning and guidance as to how to live a good life. And those rituals, those practices help you live a moral life, which is a good life. And and yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So that's what I have learned from being here and learning about Vietnam. I say to my friends, in the last year living in this village, I have learned more about Vietnam than my entire 18, 19 years I've been in the country, you know, um, because I can combine it with sort of a macro logical lens, but it's it's anchored somewhere, it's anchored us somewhere and it explains how things are the way they are, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure myself, like many people, always appreciate being able to get out of the city. I mean, moving to moving to a village in Tay Ninh is a whole other can of worms, but yeah, it is great. Important to see the rest of the country as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Kato, I appreciate you taking some time out of your morning. I'm guessing you probably have a lot to do outside. Really interesting to hear your journey. Yeah, I mean, super unique. Just that taking that leap you've talked about. So appreciate you sharing some of that today.
Yeah, well, thanks for this opportunity, Mike. And if any of your listeners want to actually buy my rice, and get in touch, then please go to www.earthwaterfarms.com. Yeah, and the logo of the brand is the Noi Badang, which is the Black Lady Virgin Mountain, the highest mountain in South Vietnam, which is in Tây Ninh, and there's a river that runs through it, which my mother grew up on, and that's the Vam Co Dam River. So that's the meaning behind the logo of Earth Water Farms.
Yeah, and I'll include that link in the show notes as well. So yeah, thanks again, and take care.
Take care. Thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of the Vietnam Weekly podcast. Apologies again for the distance between episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate or review the show on your preferred podcast platform, and I'm hoping to be back in your feed in 2 weeks.